let me tell you about Heather. So firstly, it is from 1988, and it's about at Westerberg High, where cliques rule, jocks dominate, and all the popular girls are named Heather and Veronica. It's going to take Veronica and a mysterious new kid to give teen angst a body count. It's directed by Michael Lehman. Yeah, they're all named Heather. I was like, that's cute. One of the quotes that I put at the top of this section, just because I was like, this is so fun, is from one of the teachers after a student kills himself, or a few of them kill themselves, and now it's like hysteria, right? They say, whether you decide to kill yourself or not is one of the most important decisions a teen can make. And it made me just think of like Hamlet. I was like, he handled it with it the best, didn't he? You know, to be or not to be, that's the question, right?
That's
and he had some heavy stuff to work through, but that's like the birth of the teen angst. Like, who am I going to? I have to be like, I have to inherit this land, and I'm juggling like, you know, generational trauma and all kinds of other things, and my relationships all crazy, and they won't let me love who I want to love. It's a whole thing. You know, always if I could get back to Shakespeare, you know I will. Yeah. So Heathers is a dark comedy film that, through satire, challenges high school politics, social hierarchies, and the illusion of teenage depth. That's its intent, is what I will say. So blending Black humor with serious themes of violence, peer pressure, and the desire for acceptance, the film is a spectacle of teenage darkness, covering bulimia, suicide, date rape, homophobia, bullying, and self-harm, and many other things. It tackles literally everything that a teen can experience, and it does it in such a cavalier way that's both dismissive and also like acknowledging.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is it's pretty white, but other than that, yeah.
It has remember it had the one Black guy, and I was like, racism is dead.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
it's like, there he is. We got one.
Yeah, it's a diverse film.
Absolutely. It's very white, but product of its time, and it's also like, I think I am appreciative that it's white. I don't think I would have liked if they threw in like with The Craft, you have you know, the one character who's a Black girl, and her trauma is very related to her being a Black girl, and they did that in a way that could be relatable and also really triggering. There's some really awful things that are said. I don't think Heather's
wasn't ready to handle that subject in a way that was thoughtful. They handled a lot of subjects not super thoughtfully.
Honestly, shouldn't have probably handled like homophobia the way that they did, because it was still homophobic. Like, I don't feel that was that one's not good for. So it's like, you picked a lot of battles, and I'm glad that that's not one that you also
because they would have done a bad job. Yeah, they would have done a bad job. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So bless them for that. Like, sometimes it's totally cool. It's totally cool to whitewash your whole cast, because don't be talking about other people's stories like that. Yeah. So yeah, very white, but very purposely white, and it does cover a lot, and so that's where I kind of felt like overwhelmed, but I think it was just trying to encompass the complexities of like all the things that youth have to juggle, especially at that time, and that even they're over it. Like, the fact they're like bulimia is so 1983 or whatever, or 1987. Yeah. The girls like throwing up, and I was like, that also felt very Mean Girls-y. Like, we don't even do that type of harm anymore.
We have to do different harm.
Yeah. Find a different one. What's really fun, I will say, like, we'll probably rewatch it just to catch a lot more of the visual cues and things. I think I was just like overwhelmed by the what was happening and like the very loudness of it, so I couldn't catch a lot of the funny bits. But I did, thanks to some videos online, find that the opening scene shows the Heathers, which are these three popular girls, and they are the social elite of this fictional school, and they're shown as delicate and well-mannered, drinking tea. They're dressed in like their colors, the red, yellow, and green, with the little like schoolgirl patterned skirt and the blazer, and then they get up from their tea party, and they walk and they step over a fence, and they crush roses. Like, they just step on them, and then they move forward, and just like them leaving destruction in their wake, and it just sets the tone for like, these girls are chaos. Like, you think they're like these angelic cherub babies, and they're not. They're evil bitches. So the film follows Veronica Sawyer, who is part of the most popular clique at school, known as the Heathers. And the clique is led by Heather Chandler, lead Heather, along with Heather Duke and Heather McNamara. Veronica becomes increasingly fed up with the toxic and impressive behavior of the Heathers and how they treat other human beings. And she rants in her diary about the lack of depth in her social circle and a desire to be more. Whenever she's writing in her diary, she has her little monocle. Like, she's very clearly just trying to be like, I am so in touch with my life and my soul, and I'm better than these girls. And even as she tells her new beau, who's JD, she says, well, it's just like they're people I work with, and our job is being popular and shit. And that's just like the relationship she has is very transactional with these people. Like, she's fulfilling a role, and she knows that she has to do it. And so it's not really a companionship. They don't care about her. She doesn't care about them. They just have to fulfill these roles. And after a particularly unpleasant fight with lead Heather Chandler, Veronica makes some bad decisions that lead to Heather's death. Yeah. On the very top of the list of bad decisions is trusting JD. I will say that, like, I do appreciate... she's just like, she's writing her diary and she's like, I might just have to kill Heather, like, as a joke. And then he, like, appears. And then I love that it really does cut to them after they have already had sex. And it was like, they just, like... no illusion of like him holding that over her. Like, it's very clear, like, she wanted to do that, they did it, and that's not even important. Yeah. Which is like in teen movies, like, that's such, especially like John Hughes, it's like just the kiss was like such a big thing. Yeah. You know, it's very romanticized. So for them to just be like, teens have sex. Yeah, let it happen. It's fine, yeah. And we just have to, like, you know, that's just what's going to happen. So JD and Veronica accidentally kill Veronica's best friend and worst enemy. To hide their crime, they forge a suicide note. JD intended to kill her all along, and he does a little switcheroo. Veronica is like, what? Oh no. And then writes a suicide note. And this sets off a chain reaction of apparent suicides among the popular students, driven by JD's growing penchant for violence and Veronica's struggle with guilt and complicity. She keeps coming back to him. I don't get that. Yeah. I don't get it. Christian Slater sounds like Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, and so I couldn't get in it. The whole time I was like, it's just Hiccup.
It is a thing, though. Like, there's, like, where specifically white women will be with problematic men because they'd rather not be alone. That is a thing. Mm-hmm. That's, like, the whole, like, your husband's a Republican, but you're a liberal, so you sacrifice your values for him kind of thing. So, yeah, I took it more as that, where, like, she's like, I'm willing to compromise because I don't want to be alone.
Yeah, I was like, how good is this dick, though? Like, because... like, I've made some bad decisions. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I've been there. Made some bad decisions because the dick same. For sure. I'm like, but not murder. I draw the line of murder. Yeah, murder's the line. Like, fool me once, right? Fool me once. Shame me. Fool me twice. You never shame me again. Yeah. You know, like that's when she does it, he does it the second time. I'm like, girl.
What are you doing?
Baby girl.
Yeah.
What's going on? So as the body count rises, Veronica finally realizes JD's true nature and intentions, and it culminates in a showdown where JD attempts to blow up the school. He's like, finally, the school will mean something. Veronica manages to thwart his plan, resulting in his death. He did it himself. It's, you know, I mean, a fitting end for him taking everybody's life and framing it as a suicide. He just went and did it himself. And in the aftermath, Veronica breaks away from the toxic social structure and decides to recreate the high school dynamics. She's like, we're free. We actually, here's the thing, we didn't have to do that. So let's talk about when your teen angst bullshit has a body count, which is what she writes in her diary so poetically with her monocle and her little like kimono looking thing. So the 80s movie landscape is rich with stories of teen angst, with John Hughes creating films that delve deeply into the teenage experience. We've all seen them. And I have never really loved them. It always took me, like, I was like, if that's what the 80s are, I don't like the 80s. And it wasn't until I saw, like, how fun the 80s actually could be that I was like, never mind, that seemed cool.
Yeah.
Because his stuff seemed boring. But his movies depicted teens yearning for maturity, seeking to be treated as equals by adults, and striving to be understood in a world that often dismissed them. Heathers mocks this perceived depth, not only in teenagers, but in society as a whole. We're not a movie. we're not a movie, right? We're just regular people. So I didn't initially care for or really get Heathers. I was put off by the disingenuous acting and the obnoxious language. It took some time for me to sit with the film and to trust people who deemed it a cult classic. I was like, what are y'all seeing? And I'm totally up for like admitting when I'm wrong with films. Like, absolutely. Sometimes I'm not like the film guru. I don't know every single film all the time. And my media literacy classes, as effective as they are, sometimes I'm squinting. I don't see it. But after all of that, I do acknowledge the impact that this film has had on films that impacted me growing up, like I said. But it wasn't until I understood that it was a direct response to the trend of teen films like Hughes is known for, films that I was never entirely into, that I then grew a kind of fondness for it. Like, I understood its place in the film sphere and like what it was intending to do and the importance of it existing as a like dichotomy to all of the other things that were like teens like ignore. Like, a lot of those films, as much as they acknowledge some of the darkness of teenagehood, like, Breakfast Club, I forget what his like his title is, but the kid who's just like, my dad puts out lit cigarettes on my skin and then just moves on. Like, how do you have that and then you like transform the goth girl into a prep and you're like, we fixed it? That level of like dismissing the severity of what you just said, like what you just admitted to. Like, we need to call CPS. Like, what's like, hold on.
They didn't really have it like that. Like, yeah,
I know. CPS. But I just mean like that, like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, there is some darkness in the world, but we could just put it with a bow, and it's like, at the end of the day, we have prom, and so like that's laughable because real horrifying things were happening in the world and with the teens. And so when you're dismissing them, and like, that's kind of what this commentary is. It's just like, there is some really bad stuff out there, and at the same, like, we're not all that deep, but we all are that hurt.
Yeah.
Like the fact that like films of the time were emphasizing the wrong things and ignoring the other things, right? So I do want to give a big thanks and shout out to The Take, which is a great resource for media literacy, and other content, and their reviews are always super helpful. And they really put this film into perspective for me mostly. And then I had like a bunch of other things that I was like pulling from, but like, so thanks to The Take. In their video, Heathers, High School is a Black Comedy, they say, Heathers primes us to look for meaning in high school drama and pain, and then it reveals that there is none. The movie's stroke of brilliance is the way it mocks the takeaway of almost all other teen movies, and that's the idea that our high school peers have a secret depth we've overlooked. I'll say I was victim to that. I thought I was deeper than I really was. I think back and I'm like, girl, you didn't have nothing going on in there.
I think you were. I'm going to get on to my section. I disagree with their take, and that's fine.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think it's like, I think it's that they're not a fantastical level of deep, or like they're not a cinematic deep. They're a regular person deep.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't need to be like immortalized in such a dramatic way. Like when anyone dies, they're like, they were this amazing hero to society, and like sometimes they're just like a guy, Yeah. So I get it.
But I mean, the guy is still super valid and
super important. Super matters to like their family and the greater community that they lived in, and absolutely. But like, I get what you're saying. We're like, there's a regular person. They're not like this like infamous. Yeah. Everyone in the world's going to know them and remember them forever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the thing is like everyone has main character syndrome. And that's the issue. It's like, we're not all the main characters. I'm sorry. Some of us are side characters. And also like main character doesn't always look like what we were told main characters look like. Yeah. So I think that's what I took away from it. Wasn't that like they're shallow and meaningless. It's just like, we ain't like that. and you're looking at the wrong things. So JD is very keenly aware of the superficial lives of his classmates, and he's bitter, disillusioned, and nihilistic about it. And he believes Veronica needs only a slight push to fall under his spell. And after forging Heather's suicide note, the school erupts in false praise and concern for someone who had seemed incredibly shallow to Veronica, but has now been given depth. That's like the contrast for her. I will argue that like what we saw of Heather Chandler, like there is a darkness that was in her. There was some struggles that she had and things that like she was clearly needing to fulfill a specific role. And it's not to say that she had the best like language, right? She didn't know myriad. That's fine. That doesn't denote whether or not you are full of depth or not, or worthy of life. Like that's not like, and she was a bitch too. That's okay. People can do that. She knew what role she was playing, and she knew she had won the lottery of those roles. And I think like that in itself was really quite spectacular. I think she would be like, oh wow, that's a wonderful, like I'm glad that that's how I went out and like that I got all that attention. I feel like y'all didn't know her like that. So later, other popular kids receive similar treatment, with their deaths transforming their legacy and image forever. And Veronica writes in her diary, suicide gave Heather depth, Kurt a soul, Ram a brain, and their deaths are romanticized. And the truth is that they weren't exactly that level of deep or feeling or meaningful. There were teens who make mistakes and have limited points of view. At the end of the day, that's it. They've lived a very limited life, so that's what they're given. Nobody is, you know, an old soul. You know, like we can't all be old souls. So the suicides in Heather's become a joke, and even when they influence real attempts, there is still dark humor in it that plays up. Like when there's a real attempt, they're like, oh, they failed because they weren't popular. Like I was like, that's so rough. And this serves to critique how society often trivializes and misinterprets the complexities of mental health issues by showing how easily the student body and adults accept these suicides as genuine crises and cries for help or acts of desperation. And the film underscores the superficial understanding and lack of real empathy surrounding such tragedies. They don't get it, right? So JD says he'll underline meaningful passages in Moby Dick for one of the Heathers for her suicide note. And later, Veronica fantasizes about that girl's funeral where they're blowing out of proportion the underlining of the word Eskimo.
Hey, Ghoul Scouts, just here for a little PSA instructional thing. I use the word Eskimo in this episode. It is referencing the use of it in the film Heathers, which is referencing the use of it in Moby Dick. But just for your knowledge, that is not the appropriate word to use for certain indigenous populations. It is a word that was put upon them. It is used incorrectly and is not the accepted word. So just as a clarification for that, but back to your regular scheduled programming with Ghouls. Thanks.
And he was just like, we thought she was here with us, but she was in the Antarctic, right? Like, like finding meaning in something that is essentially nothing. And that's like what they're saying these people are trying to do with the suicides, but also just like with teens. Like sometimes it is what it is. And to me, this was like before its time, is essentially corn plating. So for people who don't know what corn plating is, Kat and I just learned about it. Corn plate is like this meme, an idea that came around from the movie Encanto when someone tweeted that one of the characters had corn on a plate. They're like, I never realized they had corn on the plate. And people were like, because they were like trying to, like, after we'd like beat all of the imagery and points of this film into the ground, someone was like, oh, and there's corn here. And everyone's like, and? Like, that's what you would eat in that region of the world. So corn plating is used to describe pointing out minuscule or meaningless details in a movie for the sake of keeping up with discussion about it. And the way that people were reacting to elements of the suicides felt like corn plating to me. And I also think in a meta way, people who react to Heathers in certain ways and who are like exaggerating meanings of some things or creating narratives and ideas around things that are happening in Heathers is also corn plating. So I think it's like it's funny that it's done that to itself in becoming so infamous, that it was like essentially people are highlighting meaningful words in Moby Dick and, you know, going crazy over Eskimo, but for this film. Yeah. If that makes sense. So they also, in addition to like the exasperation of like over dramatizing the deaths and kind of glamorizing them, they put Heather C's suicide note in the yearbook. And they also passed it around English class. Like, there's so much of it that's like, get real. It's so insensitive while trying to say we're being sensitive.
That's what that time period was a lot, honestly.
Yeah, get over it.
If you're ever like, why is my parent like this?
Well, watch Heathers. The take continues explaining that with Heathers, Waters, who is the writer, was actually making fun of the way that some 80s shows and documentaries, in his view, made suicide seem attractive. This happened a lot. There's also documentaries in their songs and all kinds of teenage suicide. In modern media, we've seen toxic approaches to suicide, like the show 13 Reasons Why and the book that preceded it. I will say the book put things in perspective of me, but the show seemed no bueno. And influenced, you know, young people taking their lives. And it's actually 13 Reasons Why is referenced in Heartbreak High, where they say like, is this your 13th reason? And so it's become like a term now to indicate like taking of your life. And it was asked like when something terrible happened, essentially experiencing social ruin. Right, which for Gen Z could be a big deal, worth that, and there's still this flippant and accepting approach to suicide. Where for Gen X, it was laughable and dismissed. It was like, if you did that, who even are you? Like, who do you think you are that you're worth our attention in any type of way, or you're better off dead, right? So the film's approach to suicide has sparked significant debate. Some viewers appreciate the film's audacity and its ability to initiate conversations about the glamorization of suicide and the often shallow response to it in popular culture. And others find the handling of such a serious topic through satire and dark humor to be insensitive and potentially harmful, fearing it might downplay the gravity of real-life struggles with mental health and possibly instigate those same reactions in the real world. Well, another big theme of the film is school reflects society, which we have talked about in the Ghouls in several ways, just about how you're molding people to become capitalistic cogs in the machine, and when we should be dismantling it. But another quote from JD, he's full of them, because that's the whole film is quotes. He says, "Now there is a school," I can't imitate Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, so I won't, but he says, "Now there is a school that self-destructed, not because society didn't care, but because the school was society." Yeah. It makes me think of like of the Joker when he's like, "We live in a society." He's like, "You got it, buddy." For sure. You're so, like, look at you, Edgeworth.
I think maybe for back then that was like a big deal for someone to say that. I think we're just so like, I think we're very drenched in the knowledge of all of this, so it seems very silly to us. Or it's like when people were like, Barbie needed to, or like, there were people who like didn't think Barbie went far enough. And I think in a lot of ways that's true, but like, it was also like the people who were like, well, yeah, but people still need to hear that. That's why no one won awards other than Ken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, it does still need to be said to some people, just as directly and kind of silly.
Just so like we live in a society.
Yeah,
right? We do. So thanks again to the take that supplied some helpful insight into the film's intention. And they say, screenwriter Daniel Waters says the film's message is a variation on something Ali Sheedy's character says in The Breakfast Club. She says, "When you grow up, your heart dies." So according to Waters, the Heathers version of this is, when you're 14, your heart dies. Because at 14, we begin to imitate adulthood. School represents the same social structures we are expected to navigate in the real world, quote unquote. It also trains us to become more efficient workers, adhering to capitalistic requirements that define our worth. Teenage years are among the most complicated times of our lives, as they encompass the various trainings and shapings of the individuals that we are destined to become. Right. And during this period, emotions are at an all-time high, and we learn to either wear our parents' identity like a comfortable coat, or we reject it altogether. And both of those are stressful, right? And we seek our place within the make-believe social hierarchies that mirror those outside of school. And to do that, you do it in school. You find your place. So the take continues to explain this, saying, a caste system distracts everyone from the realization that it's all meaningless. Popularity is a proxy for things that we think would make us happy. In the same way, in the adult world, we fixate on status, money, and career achievement, and we try to climb the ladder instead of reflecting on what it all means. In school, you're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
A recurring theme in Heathers is the tendency to attribute teenage problems to societal influences. And the film suggests that the root issue lies not in youth culture per se, but in young people mimicking the behaviors and attitudes prevalent in adult society. So, for instance, the seemingly innocent game of croquet symbolizes a cutthroat quest for domination, like societal power struggles, right? Like it's meaningless, but they put a lot of weight on it, and you have to play your game. And even like Veronica's friend is just like, no, you have to take me out. Like you have to do that to win. That's how the game is, right? And gross. That just mirrors like that's what she had to do in her social world. She had to get rid of that friend in order to progress, and that's why she's with the Heathers. And Veronica, like I said before, draws parallels between her friends and coworkers, also highlighting this how social dynamics mirror professional environments. An impactful moment reinforcing this idea occurs when Veronica asks her mother to treat her like a human being. And because she's like, what do you want? And she's like, I just want to be treated like a human being. And
she's
her
like,
mother dismisses.
Yeah,
she dismisses this plea because she says teenagers always ask to be treated like human beings when they already are being treated like human beings, because they have had to abide by specific social structures and like a respect and like obedience towards adults. And when they're not seeing that same thing on themselves, they think like we're not being treated equal. But what's happening is they forget that like you become equal instead of being like the hierarchy. You're not now above the adults where now they give you the respect that you were supposed to be giving them. You're on par. So now they treat you like the way that they treat other adults, which is shitty. Yeah. So it's like that's just how the hierarchical structure works, especially in the 80s, where it was like you have to respect your parents no matter what they do. You listen to them, you abide by them, or terrible things are going to happen. And so when you're like, I don't want to do that anymore, I want them to respect me, you're forgetting that nobody's respecting anybody out here. Nobody's doing that.
Human life, each other as people.
Yeah, just like the planet. Literally anything. Their own kids. Like none of that. So she's just like, yeah, you're already being treated like a human being, and the problem is you don't want to be treated like a human being. You want to be treated better. You think you deserve better than that, and you don't, because we're all this, unfortunately. Which is a joke. Like we all should be better. We should all be better. We should all be better. Absolutely. But that's what the mom is saying. She's just like,
I got you.
Kids, they want respect and basic human decency.
Yeah, human rights.
Nobody. I don't even get that. You know, so this interaction underscores the film's critique of how adults in society at large often fail to recognize the genuine complexities and needs of teenagers, instead expecting them to conform to adult standards and behaviors, right? Like you stop being a kid and you're immediately, now you have to be an adult, which means we don't care about your feelings anymore, even though you're feeling all of them all at once times a million. In summation, Heathers uses dark humor and satire to glamorize suicide and youth imitation of adulthood. Its willingness to tackle uncomfortable topics head on and its unapologetic portrayal of teenage life make it very provocative and enduring film that continues to resonate with a lot of audiences. It became a cult classic. Despite like poor marketing and it didn't have enough money to do marketing. That's another fun thing. So it was like that image where she's like on the chalkboard, it looks like a rom-com, and then people come and they're like, oh my god, what is this? This is so triggering. So it had very bad marketing and did not make any money in the box office. And then later people were like, oh wait, it's like Jennifer's Body. We got Jennifer's Bodied. It simultaneously critiques the fanaticism behind the teenage existence while treating them like actual human beings, flawed, and though not as deep as we imagine ourselves to be, still full of potential in life if only given the proper chance to grow. So Heathers teaches us that social suicide and the death of your social standing, of conforming to society's expectations, can be a freedom. You can finally live your life according to your own desires in depth. And as JD, again, at the end, one of his great quotes says, now that you're dead, what are you going to do with your life? I was like, social suicide.
Bro, it's like, I feel that. You want me to not work anymore? It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I don't have to be a cog in the machine.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Love that
Kill
for
me.
us. We need freedom. And
Yeah.
it's also like, I guess, a commentary on the fact that like teenagers generally are like the last step before you have to be an adult and do work and have unhappiness. So I guess it's a little bit of that too.